In my last video, I demoed this astronomy event tracker that is built in MindStudio. And what this does is that it will every day get the astronomical events of both planets and celestial events that are viewable from your specific location. And it does that 3 days in advance so that you could prepare for your viewing, and then that is delivered to you in email. We looked at yesterday this one that does the planetary events from this website, Objects in Your Sky from Planets. Today, we're going to look at calendar events from this same site, but they have astronomical calendar events for this year. And we're going to scan down here to, it is September 9th today, but because this will scrape information 3 days in advance, it will be getting information about these two events that will happen, the moon at last quarter and lunar occultation of Beta Tauri. So we'll find out what those are. Let's run this. Let's first take a quick look and see how this works, and then we'll run it. This does scrape the website, and like I mentioned yesterday, it uses a global variable whereby it populates the year. This 3 represents this value of level of difficulty to see. So this will be capturing items that are visible through a small telescope, and the town, which matches my location of Cary, North Carolina, United States. So what is really powerful about this is being able to populate items in a global variable, like I showed yesterday. This workflow every day at 6 a.m. Eastern Time will determine what the global variable is, or what the date is of every date 3 days in advance, and save it to the global variable. And I then use that global variable for the year, month, and date to populate into this workflow, and then into this scrape URL. So this is a powerful way to get information. I do that more specifically with this workflow here, where it's setting the URL with those values and then adding the scrape URL. In this one, it's pretty much just doing a scrape of the date itself and the year. So it's looking at the entire calendar and then finding the events 3 days from today, which in this case is September 14, because today is September 9. Then it structures that into a JSON array. And in each item, it captures the title of that event, like we see here, moon at last quarter and lunar occultation of Beta Tauri, and adds them into a JSON array, which then determines, it will check to see if this array is empty or not. So for example, if this ran yesterday, notice that there were no events here on September 13. It would have been an empty array, and then if it was empty, it would have stopped and gone to end, and there's no need to continue in this workflow. Now that there is something in that array, it will then use a run workflow block to get, this is the input array called calendar events right here, and it will iterate across all the items that are pertinent from that JSON array for that date, that future date 3 days in advance. And for each one of them, notice how there's item URL, item title, that represents the title key name and the URL key name that are for each one of them. And it iterates through this workflow. And it is fed. Notice how there are two start variables, launch variables here in the start block, title and URL. And it scrapes the variable URL and saves it to an output variable called event scrape. And then it summarizes that in a certain way that I want for astronomical events. I provide the context, the role that this is the assistant is an astronomer with expertise in explaining astronomical events to lay people, have a certain format and constraints that I use, and then it feeds it back to a variable called summary in this JSON output from the end block. When I come back here then, it captures all of them into an output variable called summaries, which is the aggregation of all the summaries for that day's events, or that evening's events. And then everything else is pretty simple, is that here it's just ensuring whether these events are actually viewable from Cary, North Carolina. If they're not, then don't include it. Remove it from the summaries. generates a sky chart using Nano Banana, Gemini 2.5 flash image for those locations that are in this variable, and then uses the send email block with both of these variables in the body, and then I'm dynamically generating this output for the instructions, which is then generated on the fly. So one thing that you will notice with the send email block when you're doing this dynamically is it's great that you don't need to know code, you don't need to know HTML to generate this. However, because it is using a LLMs are non-deterministic. Their output varies no matter how well conceived and crafted you have a prompt here, like in these instructions. They will always have slightly different output. So you will find that in your output from your emails. Watch for my video tomorrow where I show you how to overcome that and still use the send email block to deliver your outputs. Stay tuned for that video tomorrow. So now let's see how this runs. I'm going to run this in draft mode. So it is scraping the calendar URL that we looked at, structuring it into JSON, checking if that JSON array is empty, which is not. It is now scraping those two items. Like we saw, there are two events that will occur on September 14. Verifies that these are visible from the geolocation coordinates of Cary, North Carolina, United States. Generates the sky chart using Google's Nano Banana, and now sends an email. Although it's first generating the email content dynamically, and then we'll send the email. It's successfully completed. So now let's see what this looks like. Here we have this email. And let me display images. And here we see a really cool looking sky chart. Here we see what it's for and which direction to face. And hopefully this is a useful sky chart. I wouldn't be able to see anything from Cary, North Carolina because I have way too much light pollution here. And here's a great description of each one of these. I was curious what this is. Lunar occultation of Beta Tauri. The moon will pass in front of the star Beta Tauri, also known as Elenith, and creating what astronomers call a lunar occultation. Pretty cool. I may run this even just to learn a little bit more about astronomy. But this would be very useful for people who live in rural locations, who do have the advantage of a clear night sky. So stay tuned for my video tomorrow where I show you how to overcome this randomness and slight variation in the email. How you can have a consistent output every time. Thanks for watching. I hope you found this interesting.